So what's up with MedLegal, and why are we talking about MedLegal today?
Well, I think this is going to be well received because our audience is probably very curious about what's going on, what happened with MedLegal. I think there's some highlight headline information that our general audience has about what's up with MedLegal, what happened. And here we are in May of 2022. And, I guess to recap for people that don't know, in December of 2021, MedLegal filed what's called a Warren Act, which gives employees, it's required when closing down an operation, a business, that you give employees 60 days notice that the business is shutting down. So I think our audience is interested in that story, but I think also what's really important, and I'm excited to talk about, is MedLegal's legacy, what they brought to the industry. I think that there's some rumors about what happened. I think clarifying those sorts of things, paying tribute, and helping our audience understand how much we value what MedLegal has done, how much Gemini values what the history of MedLegal and what they've done for us, literally. I'm excited to kind of talk about it, and I think it's going to be kind of a little bit controversial. I think for the employees that were caught up in this, I think that they put so much into making MedLegal successful, and for it to fold like it did, I think it's still a little raw for employees that committed their entire career to MedLegal. And I think for clients, they probably want just clarification on probably what happened, but also, how, we're picking up the ball in the aftermath of all this.
Definitely. So pay some tribute, talk about what we're doing to kind of continue that legacy, clear some rumors.
All right, we want to welcome our audience. This is the Ready, Set, Gemini podcast. I am your host, and Dan Mora, and this directly across from me is my co-host.
It's Frank.
Thank you, Frank. As always, we love your feedback. We'd like you to comment, subscribe, follow, like. We really would appreciate your ideas, and so please follow us and let us know what's important to you.
I was just thinking about the December. I don't know if we have this specifically planned to talk about, but it was really a bummer how it all went down. Like if we talk about anything, really feel for the employees.
Definitely.
It was like the Latino comp holiday party was it that same day?
Same day.
Hey, by the way, Christmas is right around the corner. You're going to go celebrate. And by the way, you won't have jobs.
Yeah, it was a week before Christmas when they announced the equity partners announced the closing.
Yeah, bad timing.
Yeah. So really, I felt that. I was at that holiday party, and it was sad. There was tears. There was tears on behalf of the MedLegal loyal folks.
Yeah. I think we need to be really clear too. It was the equity partners that, pulled the trigger on that, right? It's not.
Yeah, the owners, the owners and the board, they made a business decision. We can talk. I guess we'll talk about it a little bit later. Why, what happened in the market? What happened, specifically to the company? Yeah.
Well, before we go down that path, let's talk a little bit about the history of MedLegal. So, Dan, you've been in the business now 20 years.
Yeah.
So I want to start with picking your brain, getting a little bit of knowledge from you. Let's talk about the start and early history of MedLegal. How would you describe that?
Yeah, well, I came into the industry in 2002, and MedLegal was well established at that time. So at that time, the founding owners, Warren and Stephen Schneider, were still running the operation, and thankfully, Stephen Schneider has stayed in the industry in some way, shape, or form. and thankfully he's somewhat of a part of Gemini. We pay him as a consultant, and he advises us. He's got an insane amount of knowledge and background. They did. So MedLegal was formed in 1986. Prior to that, there was not much of this industry that actually existed. Attorneys did this on their own, did what we do on their own. They subpoenaed and retrieved records on their own. And in 1986, Warren was already an established and applicant attorney, was representing injured workers. And he and his son, Stephen Schneider, while Warren was still operating workers' compensation practice, he decided to create this side business of obtaining records through subpoenas. And Stephen had a background in IT and computer programming, and Warren put him to work creating software for the law office.
86. I was 9.
Yeah.
Software, like on an Apple II or something? I don't even know.
Yeah,
Commodore.
It's a great question, and it's pretty cool. Pretty cool to think about. Yeah. Story goes, I mean, they had they just started from the ground up. They had one client, and they were using the technology of the time, and continued to just develop that. More clients. In the mid 90s, I think is mid to late 90s is when they started to see. Let me preface this. I'm getting a lot of this history from Stephen Schneider.
Sure.
What he told me was in mid to late 90s, they started to create more tools for the clients. So there was specifically some software, but also a ratings book. And I guess that was still not an easy process to do ratings, to rate injuries, to establish a point of negotiation in a case.
Gotcha.
So Warren, established and successful attorney, started to write and publish some materials. Stephen says that this was an aha moment for him. Once materials started to gain traction and attorneys started to pay attention to what MedLegal was doing, that's when they started to come to MedLegal and for those resources, for information. And the way Stephen says it is the success was like an establishment of a true partnership between these clients and the vendors, which I think is a pretty cool thing.
So that's interesting. Like, these are some of the early moments of success, but those products carried on. Like, they're still of huge value today, right?
Yeah, and somewhat sad to the story, there was a turnover of management in during 2012. There was a legislative reform package, SB 863, and prior to, in the spring of 2012 is when Warren and Stephen sold a portion of the company, not the whole thing, but a portion, to a private equity group. The plan was to stay on, and with the chaos that ensued from SB 863, the relationship dissolved between the private equity owners and the Schneiders.
Yeah, the Schneiders had some really good timing there, whether that was intentional or not. I mean, man,
Yeah.
We were charging what, $250-ish on average, something like that, for one request.
Well, yeah, the short version is that the industry was cut in half. Our rates were unregulated and established based on what we would charge with the what do they call it? There's a term that's used, but there's an agreed that the rates on average were established based on what we charged and then what was paid. So that's an established that process of what's charged and what's paid is then comes up to what you can call a study that you can establish what fair rates are at. We were all around the same rates, all the copy services in 2012. And then through that legislation, our rates were regulated and significantly reduced by 40%. So yeah, to your point, what ensued from SB 863 in 2012 all the way through 2015, when the fee schedule was actually established and put into practice, that was a really, 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 let me say it two more times, really, really difficult business time for all of us. And you're right, they sold like they threaded the needle, is what Stephen said to me. So they did really well. I mean, and you know, Stephen, he wanted to relay that he just he feels like this industry really treated them well. Obviously, he's very grateful. He's grateful for the journey that he had, and wanted so much to be part of it long term. He wanted to relate that it wasn't about the money. It was about the camaraderie and the fight that they had for injured workers, and those partnerships, and the duty that they felt as they established this relationship between copy service vendors and attorneys. So it was very special, you know. But they got out it. The timing was just incredible.
I think there's proof that Stephen's being legit with that, because he's still in the mix.
Yeah,
you know, the Copy Service Coalition. He's always fighting for, you know, making the right moves and improving the industry. So definitely kudos to him.
Yeah. He's just a man. I'm so grateful for him. I'm incredibly grateful for him. We established the Coalition of Professional Photocopiers back 3+ years ago, and he stepped right in, was a board member from the get, and a
major contributor. Even more importantly than being a board member is the amount of effort and energy he put into it, right?
Definitely. I mean, his thought leadership is incredible, especially just the background. If you think about this background from 1986 as a very young dude, and his father being a very successful, smart attorney, having to then provide, or not having to, but having the opportunity to provide tools to applicant attorneys. I mean, his thought leadership, his brain power is something I'm just so grateful we have in Gemini, but also just for the industry, because that's what we're doing in the coalition. I mean, it's not about us, of course. As a result, a rising tide raises all ships, but we're really focused on creating a healthy environment that we don't have to fight. You know, we can come together and we can just be better for each other, better for the industry, better for the clients, etc.
Well, yeah. So what were some of the early signs, changes, or decisions that resulted in stalled momentum and started to contribute to what ultimately ended up as MedLegal going out of business?
Yeah. I think that, this story of the fee schedule, that time frame between spring of 2012 for the next 5 years was a really difficult time for Gemini. And for their story, the exit of Warren and Stephen from MedLegal, I think was a huge contribution. I mean, you lose the vision, you lose the context, you lose, what's working. Just not having contextual understanding of the business and the industry. Warren and Stephen were management. They were they were the management. Mm-hmm. When the private equity company came in, a few things that they did, they added several layers of management, which of course is cost. I think that they took, this is a little bit anecdotal, a little bit of information from, or specific information from people that were at MedLegal, and then just observations in the market. They took a very hard line, the private equity owners, they took a very hard line perspective on and the management on collections, and they, so for example, a good example was liens in the industry.
Yeah.
This wasn't really a product of the new ownership, but they just continued to hold the ball. What happened from a functional perspective was MedLegal, to protect their invoices, they would file liens on disputed,
which was like $150 a pop.
So it was free before SB 863.
Before SB 863.
Correct. So what ended up happening is they had, a massive volume of liens. Part of the fee schedule was a lien activation fee.
Mm-hmm. Because the courts were getting burdened with so many liens, they didn't know what to do, and they wanted to reduce that. So you can charge $180 for a request, right, to get copy service,
mm-hmm.
and to protect that, you got to pay $150.
Right. So that's post legislation and regulation. That's how it shook out.
Mm-hmm.
But prior to that, they had this volume of liens that were on file, and they had to activate them.
Mm.
So the lien activation fees that they had it was a lot of money. It was a lot of money. I'm guessing in the millions. Yeah. I think the numbers that I've heard it was in the millions that they had to put forth to activate those liens to keep them on the books.
Mm-hmm.
There was a huge fight over that for within in the process of passing SB 863, and even calling that action unconstitutional. To retroactively take these liens that you have on the court and charge $100 just to keep them in the court still smells wrong, still feels wrong. And then yes, in addition to an activation fee, to file a new lien was $150. I think all to discourage the filing of liens,
mm-hmm.
which is kind of messed up. Where you're trying to protect your bill, you weren't getting paid.
I mean, it worked. Fortunately for Gemini, you led this, and we had a different path where
mm-hmm.
we really prided ourselves on not filing liens, and it was definitely a winning choice. But
yeah, we didn't have liens on the books during that time. And not to talk about us, but that, to me, the whole lien process was you had to have the expertise, number one, and then you had to have the money to fight, to go to court if you had a lien. And it just so turned out that these activation fees, helped us. We didn't. While our competitors had to file these activation mm-hmm. fees, we did not. Yeah, so that was one thing we're talking about, kind of things that kind of was downfall. That the new PE group, they, with the divorce of the Schneiders, the loss of vision and loss of context and loss of that was massive. The insertion of layers of management
and those layers of management, they were paying exorbitantly high, pay to the employees too, right?
I don't know that specifically. I'm sure it was, quote unquote market rates, and if not more. There was some, this industry is very relationship focused, and
sure.
it just is. We can talk about why, but it's just very relationship focused, and the problem with that is that the problem and the benefit is that the people that have the relationships are going to demand a better wage. So I think that's kind of what you're referring to, is that aspect of things.
Sure. So anything else that you think contributed to the failure?
Well, these levels of management, these layers of management, we talked about that. We talked about the change in the industry just with legislation and regulation, and that was massive. It actually culminating to where the failure, when they closed doors, which, December of 2021, we have been lobbying and advocating to have an adjustment and an increase in the fee schedule now.
For how many years?
For
15?
a long
Since
time.
1986? How long has it been?
So the changes came into effect in 2015, but those changes were studied in 2013. So the amount, I talk about a 40% reduction in the billable amount. So those numbers were set in 2013. Okay, so 2013 to 2021, too many years. Was that 8 years? Too many years of basically. There's inflation. There's a huge wage inflation in California during that time. I mean, we felt
Still
it.
going.
Of course, it's still ongoing,
even at higher scales. But yeah,
and so from 2017, I started to lobby specifically the administration and show them the evidence of what was happening, the data of what was happening, and how this all affected us. And that's when we began to advocate. So again, December of 17 is when we began to advocate for an increase in our fees, justifiable increase in our fees, and we're not there. We're not even there. So December of 2021.
5 years later.
Yeah, December of 2021 is when the owners decided we can't wait any longer. The projected increase in the fee schedule would have probably kept them going. And sadly, we're still not there. We're May 2022, 6 months later, still do not have an increase in our fee schedule. So I think that also what caused them to pull the plug was they were waiting for this increase in the fee schedule for many years and just gave up. It was time. In the meantime, in between basically 2012 and December of 2021, I think that, I know that there was more loans being taken out by MedLegal
to stay afloat.
I think they had to take some more money, and what we know from talking to folks is what the bottom line was that they were just over leveraged. So it was a financial decision on behalf of the owners, and sad, but just the reality of how things shook out.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what do you think they could have done differently to ensure their survival? Maybe some learning opportunities for the other copy services out there.
I think, the whole tried and true live within your means is pretty important lesson. As we have worked with the leadership of MedLegal since their closure, there's I hate to say it, but it's just true that they could have, especially leadership, especially senior leadership, should take the ownership of what happened, and I believe that efficiency and cost cutting wasn't taken serious enough. You have to live within your means.
Gotcha. Need some Tony DeWardy's.
You need some lean, right?
And some lean. There you go.
We, during that time, were focused on listening to what was going on from our collectors, because our collection rate was not good. It was terrible. And turned the heat up very, very heavily in our collection efforts and our accounts receivable efforts. But I think, too, a difference between what we did and what they did, they went into an adversarial positioning with the carriers and with the payers, and we knew that was, we have experience. We knew that was not going to work terribly well. It's very expensive to go toe-to-toe with these giant insurance providers. Just expensive. So we went very low tech, smile and dial. Hired dozens.
I was going to say like 40, 30.
Yeah, like 3 dozen collectors. We knew each collector was profitable, and we just smile and dial. And part of the trick is that you don't want to take the control of the negotiation away from the carrier, away from the claims administrator, and put it into a defense attorney's hand. Terrible strategy. Defense attorneys just want to fight. I mean, that's what they get paid to do, is to fight. So it made zero sense to me, and even beforehand, for me to take the fight away from the claims administrator and put it directly into the hands of a defense attorney.
Charging $300+ an hour.
Yeah, and we have to go to court, and we have to do all the the legal jockeying. I mean, just made zero sense to me. So that was a a lesson that I think that they weren't listening. I think had they listened to their employees, then that would have changed. Again, just bees with honey. It's smile and dial. It's just being consistent with who you're trying to negotiate with.
Gotcha. So I guess if you had to say, what are the top 2 learn the hard way lessons that could help others like kind of avoid this, what would those be? Maybe we just covered them.
Yeah, no, I would say top 2 is I think play nice in the industry. Okay. That's probably with everybody. You have to play nice. You have to play nice.
So what's number 2? If you had to pick one.
How do I say this in a nice way?
Don't live beyond your means.
Don't live beyond. Thank you. That's the right way. Don't live beyond your means.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let's flip the script here. What is MedLegal's number 1 contribution to the industry?
Prior to talking to Steven about this, I would have said that it was their products and services, and I'm partially right, except that what he added, and I'm very happy to relay, and I love this perspective, is that he felt that those products and those services, those education materials and helping the clients be better at their job, was a partnership. And what he feels like, and I totally agree with this, that caused or their biggest contribution was making them, making what we do in our subject matter expertise indispensable to an applicant attorney. I think that is probably the biggest thing that their number one contribution to the industry. Cool.
Kind of been doing a little back and forth, a couple things that MedLegal could have done better.
Yeah.
We talk about what MedLegal does great. One other topic that I think is interesting that you and I have talked about on many occasions was, man, how is it that Gemini, we have a lot to offer, but MedLegal has a lot to offer too. In fact, they have a couple more things like the ratings tool, they have the QR books.
Well,
and then with those, they just never really marketed them properly.
10 years ago, I was super nervous that they would figure out what they had and they would flex it harder. And in talking to Steven, it was a cool perspective, because I told him that. I was like, man, I was freaking out, because we thought we had an edge on the marketing. That was something that we, as Gemini, felt like we had a good edge on, the marketing and the sales. The sales as it pertained to marketing, that whole crossover between marketing and sales was we were having good success and seeing good success. And we were really concerned that MedLegal was going to start replicating, start to notice what we were doing and flex it with all of their awesome products and services. And Steven's perspective was he knew, but things were going fine. Like, he didn't need to put any extra energy per se into that activity because everything was fine. He was focused on
he was on the top too.
Yeah. And focused on the quality of the products and services. It's not wrong. He wasn't necessarily wrong.
Yeah.
But we found a little edge and we were concerned that they were going to exploit that.
Definitely. All right. So with this whole MedLegal story, is there anything that you fear maybe miscommunicated, like buzz, rumors, things like that?
Yeah, I think that what would be sad is if there's misconceptions about, how they close or rumors that persist about, that they were doing something fraudulent or they were doing something illegal. Those are not true. None of that is true at least from our perspective. They closed because they were over leveraged from a financial perspective. Yeah. So, that would be the best thing I can communicate clearly, is that it had nothing to do with what they were practicing from a legal perspective. No, there's efficiency things that they were doing that caused them to, like I said, take an adversarial position with the insurance companies that didn't help their reputation and help them get paid better. And it was just a cost driver if I was to, assess it in that way.
Gotcha.
There was some practices that they flexed that were a little bit controversial. I would say that's fair.
Sure.
Ordering practices that I wouldn't call illegal at all, but were entrepreneurial.
Sure.
and caused some suspicion, I think, from people. And the insurance industry has has some investigators, and they've come and visited us all based on their lack of understanding for what we do, and we are the subject matter experts. And so yeah, I think that would be the biggest thing, is that they weren't shut down for anything illegal.
Sure. So what can Gemini do to honor MedLegal's legacy?
Yeah, I think this is part of it. I think keeping what they did alive, keeping the spirit of what they did alive. They had a tech focus early because of Steven's competency. They had a client focus that was a gracious giving of information. Those two things, I'm stoked that we get to kind of carry that forward. Being respectful, I think that's important.
Definitely.
Stephen and Warren, actually Warren was just recognized with an award by the Inland Empire chapter of CAW.
Nice.
Yeah, this is a month ago or so.
Oh, I never heard of that.
Yeah, cool. So that was pretty fantastic for him to get that recognition, and I do believe they did. We've all contributed to changing the industry and helping injured workers, helping attorneys, helping them. I honoring them properly is also we inherited and we're incredibly fortunate to inherit many of their employees. It was sad, for these employees to be kind of left out in the cold with insane amount of contextual knowledge and history in the industry. So we were very, very blessed to acquire a good chunk of employees from that. Honoring them, keeping them, appreciating them, and appreciating what they have, what they've brought. That's another way to honor them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And they have a little bit of a unique perspective by working at another copy service. So with our lean practices, we just want to absorb and be like a sponge to understand, what they did different, because there are positives that we can learn from them and, continue to push forward with that.
I think carrying the Schneider's voice forward, meaning they express so much gratitude for what they were given in this industry. Not every industry is respectful and gracious to people that work hard in it. And I know that they are just, they got out at the right time. Good for them. But had they not gotten out, I still think, they would have echoed the same thing, that they appreciate that this industry has supported them and their families. I think we all need to, take a step back and say that and recognize how lucky and blessed we are to be in an industry that we can support our families and support other people's families and just grow. And yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
So what is the most important message you'd want to convey to the past MedLegal clients? You know, that they were used to, you know, working with them for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden it's like a kind of like ripping a Band-Aid how fast it went.
The loyalty that clients had to the Schneiders, to MedLegal, was crazy. I recall after the transition, after the purchase in 2012, I recall going into a large client in Southern California, and he said he wouldn't move. He just wouldn't budge. I'm like, you know why I'm here? And he said, I can never budge because I feel so obligated to what MedLegal, for him, he felt obligated to honor that legacy as well, even though, and specifically he said to Warren and Steven Schneider.
Sure.
And even though they weren't even part of the organization anymore, it was crazy.
It shows you the power of the legacy, right?
Yeah, and the power of relationships, that is so it's hard for, I think this is a mistake that the private equity folks made. They underestimated the power of relationship in this industry.
Yeah.
I think we all are surprised by it. Occasionally, I thought we present a very clear, a very powerful value argument to a client where they can save money or be more efficient, and they choose not to based on a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we scratch our heads, but there's something to be said about loyalty.
Definitely.
In fact, my great-grandmother, she lived to be 96, and a couple years ago I visited her, and I asked her, you know, what would be her number one advice to young folks, and she said loyalty. I was like, okay.
Cool.
Anecdotal.
Let's see here. What are the owners doing now?
Warren is enjoying retirement. I talked to him at his honoring a month or so ago, and he's just happy dude, and just enjoying retirement. Is healthy, looked really good. I think he's just running around in his little social group and probably playing pickleball or something. I don't know. But I asked him if he was busy, and he looked healthy. I asked him if he was healthy. He looked great. And I think he's in his 80s, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about Steven?
Steven has stayed connected. He's got a couple of businesses that are associated or with, still within the industry. And then we keep him busy with he's on the board of the Coalition of Professional Photocopiers with myself and Mike Callan of Republic Document Management, and he consultant for Gemini, but he stays in the stream. He watches the case law, the significant cases, pays attention to the legislation and the regulatory movement and the administrative movement.
Sure.
Steven's a great guy, but I think he's semi-retired, if I could say that right.
So he's doing it right then, because he has DocuSense.
Mm-hmm.
He still has scan files. Mm-hmm. So he's got these businesses set up where he can have minimal touch and still make them successful.
Yeah, I think he's still building. He likes to build, and
Gotcha.
So he's building those things. I think scan files is one thing he's trying to separate himself from a little bit.
Okay.
But DocuSense, I think, is most of his focus, and that's he's trying to bridge the gap between mail and digital communication within the industry. We use him, and I know a lot of the other, a lot of attorneys and a lot of our competitors are using his services. Yeah,
awesome.
But he's well. He's well. His kids are, I think, at this point out of the house. I think he's got maybe one still in the house, but she's in her 20s, and so I think he's just enjoying life. Yeah, hobbies and but they're doing well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, happy for them.
I know we've had an opportunity to have quite a few of the MedLegal employees join Gemini. So what has happened to all the employees? Do you have much transparency on where some of them have gone?
I think a few of them have dispersed into the industry. I don't have a full perspective, but a few of them have dispersed into the industry. But we've taken the majority. We've absorbed the majority of the people that were dispersed in the industry. I think probably more than half went on and got out of this crazy industry. But the ones that have stayed, I think that we've got most of them, and then there's a couple that are, floating around to competitors, and a couple that are floating around to other types of services in the industry.
Yeah. In Northern California, I know Susan was a big powerhouse, and she went to like a ExamWorks. There you go.
Yeah.
I think that was a good move for her, kind of get out of the copy service gig. She's been in it for a long time, and hopefully she's seen a lot of success over there.
She's happy. I feel like most the people that landed somewhere in the industry I've talked to, they're happy, and that's kind of the bottom line.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's real good.
For sure.
How have law offices been impacted by MedLegal closing shop? So
probably the big thing is the tools. MedLegal, unfortunately, during the closure, those tools got locked up. So they had several tools, one of them being rating software. They had a case management system that was just getting some traction. There's a couple of products, also a quick reference guide, and they called the Yellow Book. And then they had a whole record management piece of software. All of that
Filer.
All of that got locked up with the closure. So clients have it's been cool to see, but the clients have all found their way, and probably some of them more painfully than others. But in total, what I'm feeling is that clients are okay. They've come out okay. Yeah,
that's good. That's important. What do you think about the competition and other copy services, and how the closing of MedLegal has impacted them?
Well, I talked about some controversial ordering practices, and what's interesting in this industry is records sometimes aren't used until they are needed. It's almost like a bench player. You have to have somebody on the bench. That's how I look at records. Not all the time, but some of the time. And unfortunately, some of the competitors have leveraged that to do some things that were maybe a little bit, like I say, entrepreneurial, ordering records that aren't necessary, just to be straight, or ordering records on a routine that does not make sense to the client specifically. So I say that because I think that the volume that MedLegal had is maybe 70% of that existing work that got dispersed into the market was probably 70% of the 100% that they had.
Gotcha.
So we've picked up a bit, and I think competitors have picked up too. I've talked to a few that because of this, the clients have had to find an alternative, and we're not the only alternative, of course.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Gotcha. So we talked a little bit about some of the tools, Zing, Evident, their case management system, QuickBooks, Reference, the Perfect Filer. There's other tools out there.
Yeah.
What's going on with those tools?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think everybody wants to know. And I can neither confirm nor deny what our hand is. I think that I think you'll have to wait and see, Frank. I think you'll have to wait and see. Those well, let's say specifically. So the assets that MedLegal left behind was accounts receivable, big book of accounts receivable, and then these intellectual property assets, the software and or the like rating book, the quick reference book. That's what was sold and they were sold to a company. I won't name the company. And then that company has
the AR was sold to a company, and the assets are still in the works.
No, everything was sold to that company. The company that picked up the accounts receivable also picked up all the IP and the software.
I was not aware of that.
So the question remains: is that company going to? What are they going to do with those assets?
Gotcha.
Again, I don't want to speculate or put anything out that's misinformation at this point.
But possibly tomorrow. By the time that this is released, those assets will likely be in the hands of somebody. By the time this is released, I bet that will be settled. I'm hoping. Yeah. I think it's fair to say with the assets, the infrastructure that they had was quite dated, and maybe is a fair way. The ability to run those assets and keep them alive and afloat, that was hitting some tough times as well, from what I understand. The cost,
right?
Yeah.
That's a really good. That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, when we talk about working within your means and playing within your means, the assets that they did have were expensive to maintain, and how they maintained them was expensive. It's a hard thing, though. I mean, you can't. It's hard to, and we're not trying to blame or point fingers, but yeah, that's a reality. I think that their tech stack was difficult, was expensive. Let's just say that.
Yeah, it was built over many, many years, and the work that it takes to maintain that level of technology is extreme. For those of you who don't know, that's what I do at Gemini, and I can tell you, we're constantly looking at replacing legacy systems and trying to bring tech into the future, and it's not cheap, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, maybe a good time for us to wrap up.
Well, let's do that. I got one more question for you. One more question. So, what are the things that Gemini is doing to preserve the legacy? If you had to narrow that down,
I think the key word is respect.
Okay.
I think that respecting the client's loyalty to MedLegal, recognizing the hard work and respecting what the Schneiders did and what MedLegal did. I point out the Schneiders, but there's so many other people and people that we've absorbed that put in decades of their time.
I think that's really one of the big topics, is that we brought on the people. That's a great way to show respect, because we can have those people continue to work with the clients, and
right.
I mean, even the internal operations, the processes that they do, they can continue to help Gemini better improve those, which are all going to support, getting better quality, timeliness to the clients for the requests that they make.
Yeah. Respecting what their vision was to be a partner, to be indispensable to a law firm, to provide something valuable to them on a regular basis that is indispensable. Is preserving that, I think, is important. What do they need? Not what do we need, because if we serve the client, everything's going to be fine.
Definitely. I think to better help serve the client, another thing we're doing to prevent or to protect the legacy is to support the people that were down in Southern California. One of the things that Gemini is doing, this may be a new announcement, is we're going to be opening a satellite office in Southern California.
That's very likely that we're going to do that. Yeah.
So that'd be pretty cool.
It's in
the works.
It's in the works. I'll say it's in the likelihood percentage, it's 80% plus.
Sure.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, for sure. That is exciting too. We've been conservative on geographic footprint because it's expensive, but we have to meet the client where they're at. We need to meet the employees where they're at, and that's what they think is important. And I think it will provide value for us to have a geographic location in Southern California. Have our people, put a stake in the ground. Have our clients know that we have a stake in the ground, that we're not going anywhere. Yeah. I think that's important. And it's part of the long-term vision of Gemini. We need to do that elsewhere as we grow. And I mean, when we grow nationally and internationally, like, that's going to be cool.
Internationally, I like the
the
sound of that.
Heck yeah. Of course, man. Big vision.
So any other musings that you have that you think is worthy of discussion?
No, I hope it comes across the level of reverence and respect that we're trying to convey here, especially because this is new and raw for a lot of people, and a lot of people's lives were very negatively impacted. So I think that's the main thing, is just to show that for this podcast and
definitely
into the future.
I tried my yellow shirt on earlier today, but I've put on a few pounds with COVID, so I couldn't show them the respect to rock their colors.
We did talk about wearing yellow, and I looked in my closet. I just have no yellow, and the only orange I have is our, safety orange polos.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't want to, no, I think this has been, I think we've done a good job, Frank. I think we've done a good job to honor these guys, and it's important that we continue to do that. So
cheers to MedLegal.
Cheers. Yeah. So we're going to wrap this up. We want to hear from our audience. Please subscribe, like, follow, and comment. Your feedback and ideas are really welcome. And I know that we want to talk about what's interesting to you. So Frank, as always, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. Subscribe.
See you next time.
Sounds good.